"Oh, who do we have here's black waitress?" The voice was smug, dripping with entitlement. Maya Thompson stood beside the table, pouring water into the crystal glasses with practiced grace. She didn't flinch. Her hand didn't tremble, but inside, something simmered sharp and controlled, like a flame behind glass. Gunther Steinmann, the CEO of Steintech International, sat with 3 other white men, all in tailored suits and $10,000 watches. He leaned back in his leather chair at table 7 of Brunner's, the most exclusive German fine dining restaurant in downtown Chicago. His tone wasn't just condescending, it was meant to be. Maya offered a polite smile, her eyes meeting his just briefly. "Still or sparkling?" she asked, voice soft but firm. Steinmann ignored her and turned to his companions. "Hoffentlich weiß sie wenigstens, wie man Wasser einschenkt," he muttered in German. "Hopefully she at least knows how to pour water." They chuckled, lightly, dismissively, as if she wasn't there, but Maya understood every word. What they didn't know, what no one in that restaurant knew, was that Maya Thompson wasn't just another waitress trying to scrape by. She held a dual degree in linguistics and financial economics from Columbia University, graduating top of her class. She spoke 5 languages fluently, including German, French, and Mandarin. And perhaps the most shocking truth of all, she was the only daughter of Langston Thompson, the black tech billionaire who had quietly funded a majority of Steintech's early U.S. expansion through a private equity firm. But none of that mattered tonight. Tonight, Maya had chosen to be here, to serve, to observe, to learn the world from the ground up, unannounced and unrecognized. Henry, the elderly head chef, watched her from behind the kitchen door's glass pane. He'd been with Brunner's for 30 years. He saw the way Maya carried herself, graceful, calm, but dangerous in the way. A loaded book was dangerous, silent until opened. Back at table 7, Steinmann began to go deeper into conversation, switching into full German, comfortable in his assumption that no one in the room, especially not the black waitress, understood. "Sie glauben, sie seien alle unterqualifiziert, wissen Sie?" he said. "Sie stellen sie für das Bild ein, nicht für das Hirn." They hire them for image, not intellect. Maya's spine straightened, not from shock, but from certainty. She could let it go. She could walk away like every other day she'd heard a version of this. But tonight was different. The disrespect wasn't just aimed at her tonight. It echoed with a deeper insult. It was aimed at every woman who had ever been told she didn't belong. She returned to the table, calm and steady. "Entschuldigen Sie, Herr Steinmann," she said suddenly, smoothly, in perfect Hochdeutsch. "Darf ich Sie daran erinnern, dass Intellekt nicht an Hautfarbe oder Beruf gebunden ist?" "Excuse me, Mr. Steinmann. May I remind you that intellect is not tied to skin color or occupation? If this moment moved you as much as it moved us, we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from. Your voice matters here. And if you believe in stories that challenge expectations and uplift quiet strength, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful moments like this one." The table went silent. Steinmann's jaw tightened. One of his associates choked slightly on his wine. The others blinked, unsure whether they'd misheard her or misunderstood. Maya continued, switching back to English. "Still water, for you," she said, gently placing the glass in front of him, "unless you'd prefer a splash of humility." The silence that followed was deafening. Other guests began to glance over. One even pulled out their phone, subtly recording. Steinmann leaned forward, trying to gather control. "You speak German?" "I speak a lot of things, Mr. Steinmann," Maya said coolly. "Including numbers." The room stayed still. What came next was even more stunning. Maya pulled a folded napkin from her apron. On it, she'd sketched out the summary of Steintech's recent earnings report, which they had left open on the table. With just a glance, she'd spotted inconsistencies. "You might want to revisit your Q, the 2nd of March gin breakdown," she said, placing it beside his menu. "Your Berlin division's overhead reporting seems optimistic." He looked at it, and then at her. She wasn't bluffing. And then, as if the universe itself enjoyed irony, a tall man in a navy suit entered the restaurant lobby. It was Langston Thompson. He didn't walk with security, didn't announce himself. But the moment the maitre d' caught sight of him, everything stopped. Half the room turned in awe, the other half in curiosity. Langston's eyes found Maya's immediately. He smiled, a quiet, fatherly smile. Steinman's face pallid. Because now, he remembered. Now he realized. Langston Thompson was not just a tech mogul. He was Steintech's angel investor. And Maya Thompson was the heir to the very empire that kept Steinman's company alive. Langston walked over to the table, nodded at the frozen executives, then turned to Maya. "Ready to go, sweetheart?" he asked. She nodded calmly. "Yes, Dad." Maya handed off her apron to Henry, who had stepped out from the kitchen with a knowing smile. As father and daughter walked out into the Chicago night, silence followed them like royalty passing through a crowd. Maya didn't look back, but she knew, from the stunned faces behind her, that no one at that table would ever forget the night the waitress reminded them that brilliance didn't need a title. It only needed a moment. The limousine moved smoothly through the streets of downtown Chicago, soft jazz playing in the background, as Maya sat beside her father in thoughtful silence. The lights outside reflected off the windows, dancing across her expression. She hadn't said much since they left Bruner's. Langston Thompson didn't rush her. He never did. "You handled that with more restraint than I would have," he finally said, not looking at her, just watching the city pass by. "But damn, Maya. That was one hell of a checkmate." She smiled faintly, still leaning into the shadows of the leather seat. "I didn't do it to win. I did it because someone had to say it." Langston nodded, his fingers gently tapping the screen of his phone. The video of her confrontation was already making waves, shared first by a guest at the restaurant, then picked up by a journalist who recognized her. It was now circling social media like wildfire. The title read, "Waitress School's CEO in German. Turns out to be billionaire's daughter." "I knew people would eventually find out," Maya murmured. "I just didn't think it'd be this way." Timing was never your thing," Langston quipped gently, "but making a statement that, you've always done well." Maya looked at him. "You didn't think I was reckless?" Langston turned, finally meeting her eyes. "Reckless, number Maya. That man disrespected you, underestimated you, and insulted an entire group of people in the process. You didn't raise your voice. You used your words, your education. You held up a mirror and made him look." She turned back to the window. A bus stop passed by, and for a fleeting second, she saw her reflection, faint and layered with city lights. She didn't see a waitress, or a billionaire's daughter, just herself. "I never wanted anyone to know who I was. I needed to see the world without the cushion of our name," she said softly, "to know what it really feels like when you're on the other side." Langston smiled, proud. "You saw it tonight. And you showed it who you were. Without needing a name tag." They arrived at the townhouse modern, understated, overlooking the lake. Maya's place, bought under a different name, no connection to the Thompson empire. She stepped out into the cool night air, heels clicking lightly on the sidewalk. Langston didn't follow. "I've got to fly to DC in the morning," he said, "but let's talk again soon. When you're ready." "I will," she nodded. "And Dad?" "Yeah? Thanks for letting me find it out on my own." He offered her a small salute. "You didn't just find it, sweetheart. You owned it." As the limo pulled away, Maya stood alone for a moment. She wasn't shaken. She wasn't tired. She was awake in a way that went deeper than caffeine and adrenaline. Something had shifted. The next morning, the emails started pouring in. Journalists, business insiders, advocacy groups, Columbia University, old professors, even a message from a White House assistant, an invitation to speak at a forum on racial equity in professional spaces. Henry texted a simple message. "Next dinner's on me. Bring subtitles." Maya smiled and typed back. "Only if the menu's in French this time." She sat down at her dining table and opened her laptop. As she scrolled through the comments on the video, her eyes paused on one in particular. She didn't shout. She didn't beg. She didn't even break a sweat. That's what real power looks like. But not all the comments were kind. Some called her arrogant. Others claimed the confrontation was staged. A few accused her of using her wealth for attention. She read them all, not with anger, but with clarity. This was the world unfiltered and loud. That night, she made a decision. She called up Ava Green, her former debate teammate and now head of a nonprofit for young women of color in business. "Ava, you still hosting that leadership program?" "Yeah, next month. You want to donate?" "No," Maya said. I want to teach. 1. There was a pause on the other end. You serious? As serious as the look on Steinman's face. They both laughed, but Maya's voice grew serious. I spent too long thinking that staying silent made me strong. That humility meant invisibility. But now I know silence can be complicity. 3 days later, Maya stood in a modest community center on the south side. 20 young women, ages 16 to 25, stared at her with wide, curious eyes. I started this week as a waitress, Maya began. But truth is, I've been a daughter, a student, a speaker, and sometimes, a mirror. Tonight, I want to be a bridge. She told them about her degrees, her upbringing, and most of all, about that night. Not with flair, but with purpose. She didn't center herself, she used the moment to illuminate what too many people still face every day. Later that night, after everyone had left, Ava handed her a card. We're naming the new mentorship scholarship after you, she said. Maya hesitated. I don't need my name on anything. But they do, Ava replied. They need to know someone like you exists. Maya held the card in her hand, and for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to be seen not through the name, not through the family, but through the fire she'd chosen to carry forward. Back at home, she turned off her phone, brewed a cup of tea, and sat on the balcony, watching the city breathe beneath her. Somewhere out there, Steinman was probably reviewing quarterly losses and PR damage. And Maya? She was planning her next shift. Not in the restaurant, but in the world. Gunther Steinman hadn't slept well since that night at Brunner's. In the 3 days following the incident, his name was dragged through digital mud. The clip of Maya responding to him in flawless German had not only gone viral, it had become a cultural landmark. News outlets dissected every second of it, podcasts debated the social implications, and Twitter turned him into a walking meme. The CEO who underestimated the wrong waitress. Steintech's board wasn't pleased. He sat now in a cold, glass-walled conference room overlooking the Chicago River. A few senior members of his executive team were seated opposite him. His assistant, Claudia, stood near the corner, awkward and silent, avoiding eye contact. She's Langston Thompson's daughter, Richard Marsh, head of U.S. development, said, stating the obvious. Gunther rubbed his temple. I know who she is. No, you didn't, Richard replied flatly. Because if you had, you wouldn't have humiliated yourself in front of half the internet. Or jeopardized our relationship with our single largest investor. Langston hasn't pulled out, Gunther said. Yet, Richard leaned forward. But he's gone radio silent. No meetings, no calls. You don't have to be a genius to know what that means. Gunther's ego was injured, but not blind. He knew Langston's silence was louder than words. In business, silence was warning. And Langston Thompson didn't bluff. I'll issue a statement, he said, straightening his blazer. I'll apologize. We'll spin it as a misunderstanding. Number, Richard shook his head. You won't issue anything without legal and PR review. One wrong word, and we're cooked. The door opened. In walked Karen Aldridge, the firm's crisis manager, an iron-willed black woman in her 50s who looked like she'd walked through fire just to light her cigarette. She didn't sit, just stood, briefcase in hand. I've spoken to Langston's people, she said. And to be frank, they're not interested in a private apology. They want a structural one. Gunther frowned. Meaning? Meaning, she said, unzipping her case. They want Maya Thompson offered a formal consulting position on our DEI advisory panel, effective immediately, publicly, with full compensation. Gunther nearly laughed. She's a waitress. Karen raised an eyebrow. She's a Columbia Honors graduate, speaks 5 languages, and she exposed your financial misreporting in front of witnesses. She may not be your employee, but she's already smarter than half your board. And if I say no? Karen's voice dropped an octave. Then Langston pulls funding, and every startup you've backed in the last 5 years dries up, and you can kiss your DC expansion goodbye. The room went silent. Do it, Richard said. It's the smartest move. Gunther sat back, fists clenched. Fine, but we control the narrative. We don't make her look like a hero. Karen didn't blink. Too late. That same afternoon, Maya sat at a small cafe near Hyde Park, scrolling through her inbox. It was still flooded media invites. speaking engagements, brand offers. But one message stood out. It wasn't flashy or demanding. It was simple, direct. From Karen Aldridge. Subject: Invitation to consult with Steintech Advisory Panel. She read it twice, lips pressed in a thin line. It wasn't just a token offer. The position came with real power, a chance to help reshape the culture of a global company. But it also came from the same man who'd humiliated her. Her phone buzzed. "Henry." "Girl," he said as soon as she picked up. "I saw the news. They want you on their panel? Looks that way. You gonna do it?" Maya hesitated. "Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell. The other part thinks about all the people like me who never got the chance to speak back." Henry chuckled. "Then go, but don't go quiet." Later that night, Maya called Karen. "I'll accept," she said, "but under one condition." "Name it." "I want full access to review their diversity reports, hiring structures, and executive promotions. No window dressing. I'm not your mascot." There was a beat of silence. "Deal," Karen said. "Welcome to the board." 2 weeks later, Maya walked into the Steintech Chicago office, tall glass panels, granite floors, and cold smiles. She wore a navy suit, her natural curls pinned back, and no badge on her chest. Everyone knew who she was now. Gunter stood at the front of the conference room, expression stiff. He extended his hand. Maya looked at it, then shook it, briefly. "Miss Thompson," he said. "Mr. Steinman," she replied. They sat. The cameras were ready. Reporters were present. Maya addressed them with composure. "I'm not here because I needed a job," she began. "I'm here because a moment of humiliation can become a moment of reckoning. And I believe in transformation that starts from the top." There were nods, even from the board members who'd once rolled their eyes. That evening, Langston called. "I watched it live," he said. "You were measured, firm, powerful." Maya exhaled. "It's strange. I never planned to be here. I only wanted to see the world for what it is." "And now?" he asked. She paused. "Now I want to change it." Langston smiled. "Then it's time you started using your Naminat to open doors, but to keep them open for others." Outside, the city lights flickered on. Somewhere in a corner office, Steinman stared out his window, his image no longer unshakable. And miles away, Maya typed her first official proposal for Steintech's equity reform. The reckoning had begun, but it was not born of rage. It was born of quiet fire and a voice that refused to stay silent any longer. The fourth-floor conference room at Steintech's headquarters looked different this time, not because the marble table had changed, or the skyline outside the floor-to-ceiling windows had shifted, but because Maya Thompson was no longer standing by the wall, taking orders. She was sitting at the table. 10 executives were present. Only 2 of them were women. Only one other person in the room was black. Maya noticed these details immediately. As the newly appointed consultant for the company's diversity, equity, and inclusion advisory panel, she had a mandate but not yet a voice that people listened to without measure. Today's meeting was her first real test. It wasn't about introductions or press statements. It was about data, accountability, and resistance disguised in polite corporate language. "Let's begin," said Richard Marsh, tapping his pen on the glass table. "Maya, we've reviewed your initial report. Quite thorough. Almost aggressively so." There were small chuckles from around the room. Maya didn't smile. "Accuracy isn't aggression," she replied. "It's accountability." A few heads turned. Richard cleared his throat. "Right. Well, some of your recommendations suggest a complete audit of our recruitment practices, promotion structures, and executive bonuses. That's a pretty invasive start." Invasive," Maya said, folding her hands, "is when a company operates for over a decade without a single black executive in a leadership role." There was silence. She leaned in slightly, her tone calm but unwavering. "What I'm proposing is a mirror. Whether or not you like the reflection is up to you." Gunter Steinman sat at the far end, arms crossed. He hadn't spoken yet, but his eyes had rarely left her. He didn't need to argue. He just watched, measured her. Maya knew that look well 1 part curiosity, 3 parts threat. Karen Aldridge, seated to Maya's left, finally spoke. "The board asked for change. Miss Thompson is offering a blueprint. If we wanted comfort, we should have hired a decorator." Richard exhaled through his nose, then nodded. Fine. Let's move forward. For the next hour, Maya presented slides demographics, turnover rates by race and gender, disparities in salary, blind recruitment strategies. She didn't water down the numbers, didn't coat them in buzzwords. She let the facts speak. And they did, loudly. After the meeting, several board members approached her privately. One offered a cautious compliment. I didn't realize we were that skewed. Another whispered, you were impressive. Firm. We need that. But Maya saw through the niceties. Praise wasn't progress. Not yet. Later that week, she met with employees, real people, not titles. She visited the tech labs, the design teams, the janitorial staff. She asked questions, listened, took notes. Most were stunned someone at her level even cared to ask. In the cafeteria, a young Latina coder named Reina stopped her. You're her, right? The girl from the video? Maya smiled gently. I'm her. Reina looked nervous, then blurted out, when you said what you said in German, it felt like you said it for all of us. Maya paused. I did. That night, back at her townhouse, Maya read through dozens of employee testimonies, stories of microaggressions, of promotions denied without reason, of mentorships that only existed on paper. It was more than she expected, and exactly what she feared. She called Ava. They don't need a consultant, Maya said. They need a revolution. Then lead one, Ava replied. But remember, revolutions take time, and allies. The next day, Maya scheduled a private meeting with Gunter. His office was a fortress of cold steel and Scandinavian furniture. She walked in, uninvited. He looked up, visibly annoyed. You don't knock? You don't apologize, she replied. He gestured to a chair. Sit. She didn't. I'm not here for games, Mr. Steinman. I'm here because your silence is louder than your policies. He leaned back, eyes sharp. You don't know this company like I do. No, she said, but I know people, and I know what it looks like when a leader is more afraid of headlines than of harm done. He said nothing. I also know, she continued, that if Langston Thompson wanted to, he could pull every cent from this empire tomorrow. But he hasn't. Do you know why? Gunter looked away. Because he still believes transformation is possible, even in places like this. He turned back to her, eyes tired. And what do you believe, Miss Thompson? She softened just slightly. I believe that power is only real when it uplifts others, not when it hides behind mahogany desks. Gunter sighed. You remind me of your father. Maya's voice dropped. Then listen the way you would if he were standing here. The silence stretched. Then, slowly, Gunter nodded. I'll approve the audit, he said. Full access. But I expect results. You'll get them, she replied. Just not the ones you're expecting. When she left the office, Maya didn't feel victorious. She felt ready. That evening, she returned to her balcony overlooking the lake. Below, the city buzzed oblivious, chaotic, alive. She looked out and whispered to herself, I was never meant to sit quietly. I was meant to challenge the room. And for the first time since it all began, she felt not just part of the table but in control of how it was built. The audit began on a Monday. It started quietly, just a few emails, calendar invites, and polite survey requests sent to every department. No alarms, no grand announcements. Maya knew change didn't need a parade, it needed precision. Within days, however, the atmosphere at Steintech started to shift. Whispers in hallways, glances exchanged in elevators. The staff could feel the ground moving beneath them. This wasn't just another check-the-box DEI initiative. This was a full excavation. Maya worked with a small, hand-picked team, analysts, HR liaisons, and internal advocates who'd been silently waiting for this kind of work their entire careers. Together, they dug into hiring records, promotion timelines, salary distributions, and exit interviews. What they found wasn't illegal, but it was damning. 42% of entry-level hires were people of color. Only 6% made it past middle management. Of the top 50 executives, 47 were white, 2 were Asian, 1 was black, and he had no decision-making authority. The data painted a picture of institutional exclusion not by policy, but by neglect. Maya presented the first findings to the board 2 weeks later. This isn't about feelings, she began. It's about facts. about patterns that have persisted not because someone intended harm, but because no one intended to stop it. The boardroom was silent. Karen Aldridge sat beside her, arms folded, watching the reactions carefully. Maya continued, "We're not here to shame anyone, but if this company wants to grow into the future, it has to stop pretending the past was neutral." A few board members nodded. Richard Marsh, as always, stayed guarded. Gunter remained still. After the meeting, Maya lingered in the hallway outside the boardroom, gathering her notes. A woman approached, tall, mid-50s, red blazer, silver hair pulled into a bun. "Miss Thompson?" she asked. Maya turned. "Yes? I'm Ellen Reyes, VP of Operations. I've been here 16 years, and I want to help." Maya looked at her carefully. "Why now?" Ellen didn't flinch. "Because for 16 years, I stayed quiet, and I watched good people walk away while I kept my head down. I'm tired of being safe." Maya nodded slowly. "Then let's make unsafe worth it." Word of the audit reached the press by week's end not because of a leak, but because Maya made the decision to release a public transparency report. "If we want the trust of the people," she told Karen, "we have to show them we're willing to be honest about the mess." The report didn't name names, but it included statistics, charts, anonymous quotes, and a clear roadmap for reform. It ended with a bold commitment: quarterly updates, third-party oversight, and a dedicated office for employee advocacy. Predictably, the media erupted. Some hailed it as groundbreaking. Others accused Steintech of performative activism. A few conservative commentators on national talk shows called Maya a spoiled heiress trying to dismantle capitalism in a pantsuit. Maya didn't respond. She let the work speak. But not everyone in the company was pleased. One morning, an anonymous flyer appeared in the break rooms. "Remember when we got hired for skill, not skin?" It was printed in plain black ink, no signature. "Cowardice in Helvetica." Maya found one copy taped to her office door. She stared at it for a moment, then peeled it off, walked into the employee lounge, and pinned it to the community bulletin board. Below it, she wrote in red marker, "Let's talk about it. Friday, 3 p.m. Room 408. The room was packed that Friday, not just by employees of color, but by curious onlookers, skeptics, allies, and even a few managers trying to control optics. Maya stood at the front knot behind a podium, just in front of a whiteboard. She held up the flyer. "This isn't new," she said calmly. "This isn't even original. It's the same fear disguised as fairness that we've seen for generations. So let's talk. Why are people afraid?" A man in the back raised his hand. "Because it feels like everything's about race now, like it's all we talk about." Maya nodded. "That's fair. But here's the thing. People of color have always had to think about race. Every single day. The difference now is that you're noticing. That's not oppression. That's visibility." A woman in HR added, "But if we start hiring just to meet quotas..." "We're not," Maya interrupted gently. "We're hiring to break patterns. If all we've ever done is fish from one part of the pond, and we call it merit, then what we've really done is limit our talent. True equity expands the pool. It doesn't lower the bar, it reveals how high we've been placing it for only a few." The room grew still. Someone clapped. Then another. Then the entire room joined in not a standing ovation, but a steady rhythm of agreement. It wasn't about liking Maya. It was about understanding her. That night, as Maya walked out of the building, she saw the janitor, an older black man she passed almost daily. He tipped his cap. "You're making noise, miss." She smiled. "Good noise, I hope." He nodded. "Noise that matters." At home, she poured a glass of wine and stared at her laptop screen. Her inbox had dozens of new message employees sharing their stories, inviting her to listen, to learn, to lead. She opened one from Raina, the young coder. "Thank you for speaking when it's easier to stay quiet. You gave us language for things we only felt. Now we know we're not crazy. We're not alone." Maya leaned back, heart heavy but certain. The first shockwave had hit, and it wasn't the earthquake that shook the company. It was the silence that followed, broken at last by the courage to name the truth. For every step forward Maya Thompson made, resistance grew in the shadows. By the third month of the audit, the glow of initial curiosity had dimmed. Now came the hard part: implementation. Proposals were drafted, old hiring policies rewritten, promotion criteria reevaluated. But real change meant confronting entrenched interests, and not everyone wanted to share space they'd long claimed as theirs. Maya noticed the shift immediately. Executives who once offered half smiles in hallways now avoided eye contact. Meetings started without her. Emails were lost in spam. One executive even claimed her data lacked context, though he never asked for more. Karen Aldridge warned her early on. "They're starting to feel cornered," she said, sipping her black coffee. "Power doesn't like being exposed, Maya. It flinches first, then it bites." Maya nodded, her fingers clenched around her pen. "Then let it bite. We're not here to play nice." The company's internal message boards began to reflect the tension. Anonymous posts accused Maya of favoritism, of sowing division. "Why are we focusing on skin color instead of results?" One post read, "Hard work should speak for itself." Maya replied publicly, "If hard work truly spoke for itself, we wouldn't need to hold this conversation. We'd already see balance at the top." Her words made headlines, again, but nothing shook her resolve like what happened next. Late one evening, after a long day of back-to-back meetings, Maya returned to her office to find the door slightly ajar. Inside, her desk had been rummaged through. Nothing taken but files scattered, her computer still warm. Security footage revealed nothing. "Blind spot," the guard explained. "That hallway camera's been down for maintenance." Coincidence? Maya didn't think so. The next morning, Langston Thompson called. "Is everything all right?" he asked, tone unusually tense. "I'm fine," she replied. "Just noticing more shadows." Langston paused. "You know, I fought this same resistance 25 years ago, but I had something you don't." "What's that?" "Silence. No one was watching me. But you," he exhaled. "You've got cameras on you every hour." Maya let that sink in. He was right. Every step she took was documented, debated, dissected. Later that day, during a strategy meeting with HR, Maya sat across from Richard Marsh. He was reviewing her new mentorship initiative and internal program to match junior employees from marginalized backgrounds with senior leadership. He frowned at the packet. "You want us to commit budget to this? Now?" "Yes," Maya replied. "Now is exactly when it matters." He leaned back, skeptical. "And if it fails? Then we learn, and we try again." But doing nothing has already failed too many for too long. The tension between them hung heavy, but she held her ground. Outside the room, Maya passed by Raina, the young coder. She looked nervous. "Hey," Maya said, pausing. "You all right?" Raina hesitated. I heard some people upstairs saying your program is just a PR stunt." Maya's heart clenched. "Did they say it to your face?" "Number just loud enough for me to hear." Maya nodded slowly. "Then they're not ready to be part of the solution. But we are." That night, Maya couldn't sleep. She lay on her couch, laptop open, scrolling through her timeline. The public still buzzed about her work, some praised her bravery, others questioned her motives. She read every comment, not out of vanity, but to stay grounded, to remember why she started. Then, a message appeared. Private, anonymous, subject, "You're not safe here." There was no body text, just the subject line. No traceable IP. Maya stared at the screen, pulse quickening. She forwarded it to Karen. A minute later, Karen called. "I'll have it look into it. Meanwhile, I'm pulling in an external firm for security checks. This isn't just pushback, it's intimidation." Maya exhaled, rubbed her temples. "I'm not leaving, Karen." "I know," Karen said. "That's why they're trying to scare you." The next morning, Maya walked into the building with her head held higher. Not because she wasn't afraid, but because she knew fear wasn't the point. The point was to keep walking anyway. She called an all-staff meeting. Optional, no pressure, room 612. At 3 p.m., over 200 employees showed up. She stood at the front, hands clasped. No slides this time, just her. "I know some of you are tired of hearing about race, equity, and power," she began. "I know some of you think I'm stirring trouble, but here's the truth. The trouble was always here. I'm just naming it." She scanned the room. "I didn't come here to shame. I came here to change. And change is uncomfortable. But discomfort isn't danger, it's growth." There was silence, then a single clap, then many. Maya stepped down, not triumphant, but anchored. In the days that followed, small shifts emerged. Employees spoke more openly. A new mentorship match was announced. An intern from accounting stopped Maya in the hallway to say thank you. It wasn't seismic, but it was something. That weekend, she visited her father. Langston poured her tea, just like when she was a little girl. "You're doing the work," he said, "even when it gets ugly." She nodded. "And I'm not stopping." He looked at her, pride in his eyes. "Then neither will they." Maya smiled. "Let them push. I'll push back harder." And as the city lights flickered on beyond the window, Maya understood something she hadn't before. Not everyone would clap. Not everyone would change. But if even one wall cracked, the light could begin to pour in. She was here for the long game, and she was just getting started. The air inside Steintech's headquarters had become strangely tense and not explosive, but heavy, like the pause before a storm. Maya felt it in the way conversations hushed as she walked by, in the glances shared behind coffee cups, in the silence that followed her ideas during meetings. Yet beneath that surface, something else stirred movement. Quiet, steady, growing. It started with a memo. Late one Thursday night, Maya received an email from someone named Jordan Liu, a mid-level manager in the engineering department. Subject: appreciation. It was simple, direct, and unexpectedly powerful. "I've been at Steintech for 7 years. I've never seen someone say the things you're saying, let alone from a position of power. You're not alone." She read it twice. Then another came, from Elena Thomas, a veteran UX designer. "You're not just making space, you're making it safer." By the end of the week, Maya had over 30 emails from employees she'd never met, none of them loud, none of them asking for attention, just quiet thanks. And quiet thanks, Maya knew, often meant unspoken fear. So she decided to do something radical. She invited them all to dinner. No suits, no agendas, just a long table at a local restaurant in Bronzeville, family-owned, wood-paneled, with jazz humming through the air. She reserved the back room under a private name, Project Oak, a subtle nod to strength rooted in silence. 27 people showed up. They filled the space with laughter, nervous introductions, and eventually truth. They spoke about microaggressions, about being passed over, about mentors who ghosted, managers who patronized, and systems that quietly choked ambition. Maya didn't speak for the first 30 minutes. She just listened. And when she finally did, she kept it simple. "This isn't a support group," she said. "This is the beginning of a brain trust. We don't just vent, we build." The group leaned in. "We're going to create something that can't be ignored. We're going to map out the patterns, identify the blockers, and design solutions from the inside out. You've all lived this. You are the expertise." One by one, heads nodded. Jordan Liu offered to lead on the data analysis. Elena volunteered to help build a mentorship platform. A few younger employees from marketing pledged to work on internal storytelling, shining light on hidden voices. That night, Maya left the restaurant feeling a strange mix of hope and weight. She had allies now, but that also meant greater risk. They weren't just her responsibility, this was their collective fire. And she had to protect it. The following Monday, she returned to Steintech with a new energy. She moved through the building not as a solo disruptor, but as the tip of something broader. The hallway looks didn't bother her anymore. She knew who stood behind her. Still, the resistance hadn't gone away. During the next board meeting, Maya presented a proposal for a pilot initiative, a 6-month internal leadership pipeline focused on promoting high-performing employees of color to director-level positions. It was data-driven, budget-conscious, and already had a volunteer group of 20 candidates. Gunter listened in silence. When she finished, Richard Marsh leaned forward. "Interesting, but are we sure this won't create tension? Accelerating some careers might be seen as favoritism." Maya didn't blink. "Equity isn't favoritism, it's correction," Karen added. "Besides, we've accelerated dozens of careers over the years. We just didn't call it that because the names were familiar." A few members shifted uncomfortably. Gunter finally spoke. "Implement it, but watch it carefully. One misstep, and the press will crucify us." Maya nodded. "We're not afraid of scrutiny. We welcome it." Later that evening, Maya received a message from Ava Green, Your quiet is louder than their noise. Keep going. She responded with a photo of the Project Oak Group's whiteboard names, timelines, tasks. Below it, she typed, "We're building a forest." But not all allies stayed silent. The following week, one of the company's most respected senior engineers, Marcus Hall, a soft-spoken black man with 20 years at the firm, stood during a company town hall. He waited for the moderator to finish, then raised his hand. "I've been here longer than most people in this room," he said, "and I've seen a lot of initiatives come and go, but I haven't seen anyone hold leadership accountable the way Maya has. She's not asking for special treatment. She's asking for fairness." The room went quiet. He added, "And I support her, fully." The applause that followed wasn't overwhelming, but it was real. Maya caught his eye from across the room. He nodded once, firmly. That night, Maya walked the lakefront alone, the wind cool against her face. Her phone buzzed with updates, but she didn't check. Not yet. She just stood there, staring at the water, feeling the echo of every step that led her here. Langston's voice rang in her memory. "You don't have to carry everything, Maya. Just carry it long enough for others to see they can, too." The wind picked up. The city glowed behind her, and Maya smiled, not because the fight was over, but because the resistance had changed shape. It was no longer something she stood against. It was something she was now forcing to respond. The silent allies were no longer silent, and they were just getting started. The first resignation came on a rainy Tuesday. It wasn't public, not yet, but Maya received the internal memo before most. Richard Marsh had submitted his departure notice, effective immediately. No formal farewell, no grand gesture, just a quiet exit tucked between calendar invites and department updates. He cited personal reasons, but Maya knew better. Richard had fought every proposal she made, questioned every stat, every suggestion. He had been, in many ways, her loudest opponent on the board. And now, with the leadership pipeline pilot gaining traction and the internal audit's second phase scheduled to launch, he was gone. Karen texted her one word: shift. It didn't mean victory. It meant opening. That same afternoon, Maya was invited to speak at the National Business Ethics Conference in Atlanta. Keynote slot. The title was already suggested: Equity isn't a favor, it's a foundation. She stared at the email for a moment, then closed her laptop. She needed time to think. She walked out of the building without her coat, the drizzle soaking her blazer as she stepped into the fresh spring air. There was something cleansing about it, as if the city itself was exhaling. On her way home, she stopped by the Southside Cafe where Project Oak had held its first dinner. The owner, Mrs. Langford, greeted her with a warm smile and 2 slices of peach cobbler already plated. "You look like someone who needs a reminder that you're doing just fine," she said, sliding a plate across the counter. Maya smiled softly. "Is it that obvious?" Mrs. Langford winked. "Child, when you push boulders, don't be surprised when your shoulders ache." They ate in silence for a while. Then Maya leaned in. "What if the boulder never moves?" Mrs. Langford wiped her hands on her apron. "Then you build around it. Use it as the foundation. Let it hold up something new." The next day, Maya returned to the office and made a decision. She accepted the keynote invitation. But before she could prepare for Atlanta, another storm rolled in. A whistleblower complaint surfaced anonymous, alleging racial bias in one of Steintech's regional branches in Austin. The complaint cited examples of discriminatory hiring practices, a lack of internal response, and retaliatory behavior toward those who spoke up. The report landed on Maya's desk with urgency. She read it twice, then a third time, and her stomach twisted. The complaint wasn't just about a rogue manager. It was about a pattern, and it mirrored much of what the internal audit had begun to reveal company-wide. It was a test, a chance to act, or a chance to cover up. She chose the former. Maya convened an emergency meeting with Karen, HR executives, and Ellen Reyes from operations. The discussion was blunt. "We need an external investigator," Maya said. "Someone neutral, independent." Karen agreed. "We'll draft the scope today." But a familiar voice interrupted the meeting. Gunther. He walked in unannounced, holding a printed copy of the complaint. His face was unreadable. "Are we sure this isn't an attempt to smear us while we're vulnerable?" he asked. Maya looked him in the eye. "Or maybe this is exactly why we're vulnerable. Because we still ask the wrong questions first. The room fell silent. Gunter studied her for a long moment. Then, finally, he nodded. Bring in the investigator. Full cooperation. And just like that, the crack in the glass widened. For the first time, the old power structures weren't just reacting, they were bending. The news of the investigation spread quickly. Employees from other branches began to speak up. Maya's inbox flooded again, some angry, others relieved, many cautiously hopeful. During a weekly update meeting with Project Oak, Jordan Liu raised a concern. We've got momentum now, but if this gets buried in red tape, people will lose trust. Fast. I know, Maya replied, which is why we're not waiting for the company's press release. She held up a draft of her next transparency report. This time, she included the investigation. She detailed the complaint, the scope of the inquiry, and reaffirmed the company's commitment to addressing systemic bias even when it's uncomfortable. Karen reviewed the draft and gave a slow nod. Bold, risky, exactly right. The report went live the next morning. Within hours, Steintech Truth trended on social media. Some employees were shocked. Investors were divided. A few board members called for restraint. But the employees, the ones who'd watched from the sidelines for years, stood taller. Elena, the UX designer, wrote in an internal forum, "For the first time in my career, I feel like the truth isn't being managed. It's being honored." A few days later, during a fireside chat with the company's junior staff, Maya answered questions live. One young black intern stood up, voice trembling slightly. "How do you keep going?" he asked, "when it feels like everything you do makes someone angry?" Maya looked at him and spoke without hesitation. Because change isn't about comfort, it's about consequence. And when you know who you're fighting for, not just yourself, but all those behind you, you stop fearing discomfort. The room was quiet. Then the intern smiled, sat down, and the moment lingered. That evening, Maya stood in her office, looking out at the city again. The sun was setting, casting gold across the glass towers. Behind her, the Project Oak whiteboard now covered an entire wall full of names, ideas, stories, hopes. She picked up a marker and wrote 2 words in the corner: next phase. Because the crack in the glass wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something finally breaking open. The national spotlight didn't fade. If anything, it burned hotter. Following Maya's public transparency report and the announcement of the independent investigation into Steintech's Austin branch, news outlets swarmed. Some hailed the company as a case study in corporate accountability. Others sniffed for scandal. And in the middle of it all, Maya Thompson walked a tightrope, trying to move the company forward without letting it fall apart. She wasn't naive. She knew the attention wouldn't last forever. The media cycle would move on. But for now, eyes were watching. And that pressure, she realized, might be the very tool she needed to make lasting change. One of the first signs of that change came from within. A senior manager in the Chicago product team, Daryl Vincent, white, mid-50s, requested a private meeting with Maya. He was known for being competent, but cautious. Never rocked the boat. Never asked for much. He sat in her office, hands clasped, clearly uncomfortable. "I need to talk to you about something I should have said years ago," he began. Maya didn't speak. She let silence invite truth. Daryl looked at her. "There's been this pipeline. Unofficial. A kind of back channel for promotions. It's not in writing, but it's real. Certain people, friends of certain executives, get tracked early. They're groomed, prepped, offered shadow roles. And everyone else? They're left guessing." Maya's stomach tightened. "Are you a part of that system?" she asked. "I benefited from it," he said quietly, "but I never created it. I just let it keep happening." Maya looked him in the eye. "Then here's your chance to change that." She invited him to testify in the next phase of the internal audit, confidentially, with legal protection. He agreed. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. The audit team began connecting the dots between Daryl's testimony and existing data patterns. Suddenly, what once felt like bias by accident began to look like something worse: bias by design. Nothing illegal, nothing explicit. But the impact was the same. Maya drafted a report. Not for the press this time, but for the board. The title was simple: Systemic Favoritism and the Illusion of Merit. She delivered it during a quarterly board review. The room was packed. Even Gunther Steinman leaned forward. "The pattern is clear," Maya said, clicking through slides. "Informal pathways to power that disproportionately benefit a narrow demographic. We've built a meritocracy that looks fair but operates like a gated community." Some board members shifted uncomfortably. One, a woman named Alice from legal, raised her hand. "What's the risk here, Miss Thompson?" Maya didn't hesitate. "The risk is losing the talent we pretend to value. The risk is pretending this company's future can be built on the patterns of its past." Silence. Then Gunther spoke. "And your recommendation?" Maya took a breath. "We dismantle the shadow pipeline. Formalize mentorship. Implement blind reviews for leadership roles. And publish our leadership track statistics annually." Karen nodded in quiet approval. Ellen Reyes, too. It passed. Narrowly. That night, Maya sat alone in her office, the city twinkling beneath her. The air was cool, her shoulders tired. She thought about the layer show. Every win came with resistance. Every step forward dragged shadows behind it. Then came the bombshell. An anonymous source leaked parts of the Austin investigation to the media. The story ran on a major outlet, painting a picture of a toxic culture at Steintech. Names were redacted, but the implication was clear. Steintech had allowed racial discrimination to fester unchecked. Investors panicked. The company's stock dipped for the first time in a year. Karen called late that night. Crisis meeting. 8 a.m. sharp. Maya didn't sleep. At the emergency meeting, the board demanded answers. Some suggested Maya's transparency had invited chaos. Others claimed the media had twisted the facts. Gunther looked at her across the table. "What do we do now?" Maya stood, not defensive, not shaken. "We double down, not retreat. We name what's wrong, we own it, and we lead the way forward, not in silence, but with clarity." Richard's replacement, a younger executive named Brian, scoffed. "That sounds noble, but what if the damage is already done?" Maya turned to him. "The damage wasn't done by naming the fire. It was done by letting it burn for years. We're just finally admitting there's smoke." Karen backed her. "If we run now, we lose more than market share. We lose credibility." Gunther nodded slowly. "Prepare a public statement. With teeth." Later that day, Steintech released a groundbreaking admission, acknowledging the findings of the internal audit, committing to structural changes, and inviting third-party watchdogs to oversee implementation. The markets wobbled, but the public responded positively. Employee approval rose. Job applications from diverse candidates surged. Project Oak gained new members. Still, the pressure remained. That evening, Maya met Langston at their favorite old diner. The waitress knew their names. The same cracked leather booth. The same slow jazz on the radio. He looked at her, his eyes soft but alert. "You've taken them further than I ever could." She stirred her coffee. "But I don't know where it ends." Langston smiled. "Change doesn't end. It evolves. Like rivers, like justice." She looked out the window, the neon sign flickering above the rain-wet pavement. Outside, the system still loomed large, but inside, something had shifted. Not in headlines, not in applause, but in the marrow of the institution. They were no longer waiting for change. They were inside it, making it, naming it, living it. And the glass was cracking louder than ever before. The backlash came subtly at first. A few board members began missing meetings. Budget approvals for Maya's initiatives were delayed without explanation. Emails suddenly went unanswered. It wasn't overt insubordination, it was something more insidious. Inertia disguised as order. Maya recognized the tactic immediately. She'd seen it used before in corporate spaces to wear down reformers without ever raising a voice. Silence wasn't just a response, it was a strategy. The pressure inside Steintech's headquarters built like steam in an old pipe. On the surface, everything looked composed. Employees still clocked in, meetings still filled calendars, and the quarterly numbers were still solid. But Maya knew a stress fracture when she saw one. The external audit of the Austin branch concluded in late spring. The findings were damning not just because of what was uncovered, but because it confirmed everything Maya had already warned about. Racially biased hiring, managerial favoritism, and retaliatory practices against whistleblowers. Gunther called a meeting the morning the report landed on his desk. "This can't be brushed aside," he said plainly, the thick German accent more pronounced under pressure. "No," Maya replied. "It can't." The boardroom was thick with tension. Karen sat at Maya's side, flanked by Ellen and a younger executive named Dev, one of Project Oak's earliest internal allies. Gunther continued, "The press will get this within days. We must get ahead of it." Maya spoke slowly. Not just with words, with action. She slid a document across the table, a 5-step accountability framework, mandatory leadership training, transparent disciplinary processes, public restitution for affected employees, anonymous reporting channels, and a quarterly equity impact report published company-wide. "This is what accountability looks like," Maya said. Brian, the young exec who'd replaced Richard, raised an eyebrow. "Restitution? That could cost millions." Maya didn't blink. So does silence. The room went still. Gunther leaned forward. "Do it." The next day, the company's official statement was released. It was the most direct language Steintech had ever published, acknowledging failure, detailing consequences, and committing to an overhaul not just in the Austin branch, but across all departments. For many employees, it was a moment of vindication. For others, it felt threatening. Maya received an envelope at her desk the following Monday no-return address. Inside was a single printed sentence: "Stay in your lane." She stared at it for a long time before sliding it into her drawer without flinching. Later that afternoon, she visited the Steintech coding lab, where a group of young engineers were preparing for the company's first internal innovation competition, an idea she'd pushed forward to amplify new voices. Raina met her at the door, visibly excited. 3 all-female teams in the finals, she said. "One of them's led by a trans woman, and they're good." Maya smiled. "That's what happens when we open the gates." That evening, Langston called. "I saw the report," he said. "Proud doesn't begin to cover it." She exhaled. "Feels like we're moving through wet concrete some days." "You are," he said, "but you're not sinking. You're shaping it." The week that followed brought another unexpected challenge. An internal memo leaked an old one, from 5 years prior. It revealed that a previous Steintech board had actively ignored complaints from Black and brown employees, prioritizing brand stability over internal dissonance. Though none of the current leadership had signed off on it, the damage was real. Social media erupted. News anchors debated. Pundits questioned Maya's role. Was she too close to the company now? Had her work lost objectivity? Maya called an emergency press conference note in the company's PR office, but in a local community center where she had spoken years ago as a student. Standing in front of the crowded room, she spoke plainly. "I didn't join Steintech because it was perfect. I joined because it was broken, and I don't run from cracks. I work to fill them. Not for applause, not for headlines, but for people who've been overlooked for far too long." The room was silent. Then applause. Long, steady, real. One reporter asked, "Do you still believe this company can change?" Maya smiled. "It already has. Not perfectly, not completely, but undeniably." Back at headquarters, Karen met her with a glass of sparkling water and a quiet smile. "They're going to keep testing you," she said. "I know," Maya replied, "but I'm not the only one being tested anymore." She pointed toward the whiteboard in her office, and now nearly filled with photos, quotes, graphs, and notes from Project Oak. "It's not just me pushing. The culture is starting to push with me." That night, Maya walked home instead of taking a car. The streets were loud, humid, pulsing with spring energy. She passed murals, food trucks, old men playing chess under awnings. Life didn't stop for corporate drama, and that was the point. Real change wasn't just boardroom policy. It was how that policy echoed down into homes, schools, lunch tables, and late-night conversations. She paused at a bookstore window. A new release caught her eye, Legacy in the Making. She smiled, but not because of the title, because she knew now what legacy meant. It wasn't being remembered. It was being repeated. And as Maya turned the corner toward her block, phone buzzing with updates, sky bruising into dusk, she understood one more thing. The fault lines were no longer just fractures. They were maps, and she was learning how to read them. The sun hadn't yet risen when Maya stepped into the main conference room at Steintech. The room was quiet, still bathed in the faint blue of early morning. She took a seat at the head of the tableau out of ego, but out of intention. Today wasn't just another meeting. It was the beginning of a reckoning. The quarterly leadership summit was scheduled to begin in 30 minutes. All regional directors, department heads, and board members would be present physically or via video link. The agenda was clear: unveil the first equity impact report. It was Maya's brainchild, and it was going to change everything. Karen arrived first, coffee in hand, her sharp eyes scanning the room as she sat beside Maya. "You ready for this?" "I've been ready," Maya replied, though her hands fidgeted under the table. "It's the rest of them I'm not so sure about." One by one, the room filled. Gunther arrived with his ever-stern expression. But this time he greeted Maya with a small notice signal of respect, hard-earned over months. Ellen took her seat with a folder of notes and highlighters. Even Brian, once vocal in his resistance, came in quietly, no sarcasm on his tongue. The room dimmed. Maya stood and clicked the projector. "This report isn't a defense," she began. "It's a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. They reflect, even when we don't like what we see." Slide after slide filled the screen. Hiring disparities, retention gaps, salary comparisons across race and gender, leadership demographic breakdowns. There were no cherry-picked wins. There was only data and truth. The silence in the room grew heavier. Then Maya clicked to the final slide. A single quote in bold letters filled the screen. "If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." Desmond Tutu. She turned to face them. "I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to be present, to stop hiding behind systems that benefit a few while costing the many. This company has a chance to lead not by slogans, but by action." A beat passed. Then Gunther cleared his throat. "We knew this day would come. The only question is, what do we do with it?" Ellen spoke next. "We implement the recommendations in full, no half measures." Surprisingly, Brian nodded. "We've come this far. Backing down now just proves the critics right." The room voted, unanimously. That evening, as the internal message board lit up with reactions to the report, Maya sat at her desk scrolling through the comments. Some were hopeful, some skeptical, some angry, but they were engaging. That was new. Then, an alert popped up: anonymous message, high priority. She opened it slowly. Inside was a screenshot internal chat thread between two senior engineers mocking the equity report, racial slurs, jokes about Maya's special treatment. One even suggested, "This all ends when we get someone else in her seat." Her stomach tightened. She forwarded the thread to Karen and HR with a simple subject line: "Next step." The next morning, disciplinary action was taken. Fast, visible, zero tolerance. Maya didn't gloat. She didn't issue a statement. The action spoke for itself. But something else happened, too. By noon, over 100 employees had signed an internal petition calling for a permanent office of equity, not just a project team. They demanded it be led by Maya, with full board authority and independent oversight. It was more than support. It was a movement. When Maya presented the petition to the board later that week, she expected resistance. She was met with applause. Effective immediately, Gunther announced, Steintech will establish a permanent equity and inclusion office. Maya Thompson will serve as its founding executive director. Her eyes widened slightly. "You're certain?" He nodded. "You earned it, and you've built it. It should have your name on it." After the meeting, Maya walked to the rooftop terrace, alone. The wind carried spring with idyllive, unpredictable, full of promise. She stood at the edge, looking out over the city that had shaped her, the one she was now helping reshape. Langston called, almost like he knew she needed to hear his voice. "They made it official," she said. He didn't say congratulations. He said, "So what's next?" She laughed, tears in her eyes. "We build the future, this time with different blueprints." He paused. "You remember when you asked if a boulder ever moves?" "Yeah. You didn't move it, Maya. You cracked it, and through the cracks, light came in." That night, she met with Project Oak for dinner. No whiteboards, no agendas, just food, laughter, stories. Jordan toasted her. Elena gave her a framed copy of the Equity Impact Report cover. signed by everyone in the group. "We believed in this," Raina said, "because you believed in us first." Maya held the frame close, her throat tight. In the middle of dessert, her phone buzzed with an incoming message from a national civil rights organization. They wanted her to speak at their annual gala. Title: Breaking the Blueprint. Maya looked up at her team, her friends, her fellow builders. "We're not done," she said. And in every nod, every smile around that table, she saw the truth. They were just getting started. Spring turned to early summer, and with it came the first visible signs that Steintech was changing not just in policy, but in culture. The hallways felt different. Conversations that once fell silent when Maya walked by now continued openly, even inviting her in. People no longer whispered when equity came up. They leaned in. In the newly constructed Office of Equity and Inclusion on the 15th floor, Maya stood at the window looking out over the skyline. Her name was now etched on the office door not as a symbol of power, but of accountability. She wasn't interested in legacy in the traditional sense. She wanted her work to outlive her name. The office bustled with activity. Project Oak had evolved into a formal team, and the first cohort of employees from underrepresented backgrounds had completed the Leadership Track initiative. 2 had already been promoted. Another was co-leading the next innovation sprint. Maya reviewed a final report for the board, a year's worth of equity implementation, audit reforms, mentorship metrics, and grievance resolutions. It wasn't perfect, but it was more progress than Steintech had seen in a decade. Karen walked in, her smile easy and proud. "They're ready for you." Maya nodded, tucking the report into a leather portfolio. "Let's give them the truth." The board meeting was different this time. No posturing, no veiled resistance, just focus. Maya presented the final phase of the reform cycle, and when she finished, Gunter spoke first. "What you've done here," he said, "has redefined how this company will move forward. On behalf of this board, thank you." Then, for the first time since she joined, every member stood and clapped. Later that day, Maya sat in the quiet of her office as the sun cast a golden glow across the hardwood floor. She opened her laptop to finalize her keynote speech for the Civil Rights Gala that evening. The title, "We Built the Room." She began to write. "There was a time when I believed that gaining a seat at the table was the goal, that if I worked hard enough, learned the code, adapted the voice, I could belong in rooms built long before I was born. But I've learned something more powerful sometimes. It's not about sitting at someone else's table. Sometimes, it's about building an entirely new room." She paused, reflecting on the journey. From the night she stood in that restaurant as a waitress to this moment executive, advocate, builder. The journey hadn't been linear. It had twisted through confrontation, loss, victory, and revelation. Her phone buzzed with a message from Langston. "Proud of you always. The world caught up. You just kept walking." That night, Maya stood behind the podium at the gala, dressed in deep blue, the room glittering with luminaries and changemakers. Her voice was steady, her presence magnetic. She told her story not to center herself, but to offer a blueprint for others. She spoke about the silent allies who became leaders, about dismantling shadow systems, about building with empathy and clarity, about the work of repair and renewal. She ended with a line that would later go viral. "Justice isn't a destination, it's a discipline." The room erupted in applause, not performative, not obligatory, real. After the gala, as Maya stepped outside into the warm evening air, a young woman approached her nervous, hopeful. "Miss Thompson, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm studying organizational design, and your work. It made me believe I could actually change something." Maya smiled. "You already are, just by choosing to care." They shook hands, and in that brief touch, Maya felt the weight and gift of the moment. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the momentum she had sparked. The torch was being picked up. Weeks later, Steintech published its first ever Community Equity Index, an external-facing report detailing how the company was using its influence to uplift marginalized communities outside the office walls. Partnerships with HBCUs, investments in Black-owned suppliers, scholarship programs in under-resourced school districts. Impact was no longer just internal. It radiated outward. At a staff town hall, Maya took the stage one last time before transitioning into a new role that allowed her to shape policy beyond Steintech, advising other companies navigating the terrain of racial equity and ethical leadership. She looked out at the sea of faces, diverse, alert, engaged. "I'm not disappearing," she said. "I'm multiplying, because the work is bigger than any one of us, and that's the point." As she stepped down, the applause followed her, but her heart was already ahead on the work, the next room, the next table to build. In her final moments at the office, she walked the halls slowly, nodding to employees she once knew only as data points in a report. Now, they were voices, stories, futures. At her desk, she left a single note in the drawer for her successor. "Build. Not in my image, but in your own. Be braver than I was. And remember, the cracks are where the light comes in." And with that, Maya Thompson stepped out of Steintech not as someone who had reached the top, but as someone who had reshaped what the top could look like. The foundation she left behind wasn't perfect. It was better, and it was just the beginning. The story of Maya Thompson teaches us that real change doesn't come from waiting for permission. It comes from having the courage to confront injustice head-on, even when the cost is high. Her journey reminds us that integrity, persistence, and empathy are more powerful than titles or status. In a world where silence often protects the status quo, Maya chose to speak, and in doing so, built a path for others to rise. The lesson is clear. Leadership is not about climbing the ladder alone, but about holding it steady so others can climb too.